even decrepit, but for the Dorrigo branch line inland from Coffs Harbour, there's new life. After 12 years of sweat and toil, refitting and rebuilding by a group of diehards, 2 steam engines are in service and ready to return to the winding, picturesque 70-kilometre line between Meagan and Luana. Today, as the 2 engines, both built at the turn of the century, pulled their way through the valleys of the plateau, it was a personal triumph for former railwayman Keith Jones, who bought an old disused loco in 1973.
They've got an attraction that diesels haven't got. They've got a personality. They can go good one day and for no explicable reason go terribly the next.
Today's excursion with the engines and 6 carriages was a thank you to the Rail Museum members who backed the project and helped clear the line of scrub and grass, replace sleepers and repair bridges. In 12 to 18 months' time, it's hoped that paying passengers will be sitting on board, taking in the magnificent scenery, the forests, gorges and waterfalls of the Don Dorrigo Plateau, and hopefully guaranteeing that railway, especially steam train travel, doesn't bypass this way again.
13 painstaking years were spent repairing 2 disused 80-year-old steam engines and carriages. Then the battle for a 70-kilometre rail line from near Coffs Harbour to Dorrigo. And Dorrigo was all decked out for the big occasion. Bringing back memories for some, but for others, days they have only read about in history books.
Well, steam train buffs, and that really is most of us, will want to be watching on tomorrow night's Eyewitness News at 6. We'll have a special report on the coming of the steam train to Dorrigo.
Is to become a giant tourist attraction on the New South Wales north coast. 13 years of negotiation, fights with rail unions and just plain hard work bore the fruit at the weekend when an 84-year-old engine steamed its way into the small township of Dorrigo.
It was a dream come true and the end of a long, hard battle for driver Keith Jones, better known as Casey Jones, and all his supporters. After nearly a decade of negotiations with the SRA and overcoming objections from unions who wanted their members to drive the trains, Keith was finally up front and steaming through 70 kilometres of the state's most beautiful countryside. It was back-breaking work clearing the track of bush, repairing sleepers and bridges. The disused line from near Coffs Harbour to Dorrigo will now see nothing else but steam. It's been a quarter of a century since the passing of steam engines, so the little potato town of Dorrigo was all decked out for the big occasion. It'll be at least 12 months before Dorrigo's turn-of-the-century trains and other railway memorabilia will be open to the public, bringing back memories for some and a new experience for others. Brady Hall's Eyewitness.
Train was responsible. It broke down at 4 o'clock this morning when gale force winds tore down a section of the overhead line. Repair crews had to park their trucks in one lane, which meant one lane less for inbound traffic. The result, bumper-to-bumper bedlam.
And the breakdown quickly highlighted the vulnerability of Sydney's rail system. The disruption on the bridge sparked chaos for schedules for the entire network, with nearly every train running 1 hour late during the busy peak period.
Buses were used to shuttle passengers from Wynyard Station to the North Shore, and finally at 9 o'clock the line was reopened. The NRMA said the incident emphasised the need for the harbour tunnel to be completed as soon as possible. Mark Burrows, National 9 News.
The goods yards at Port Kembla will greatly improve the efficiency of hauling the major freight services, such as the coal and the bulk steel, between the Port Kembla and metropolitan area and on the reverse journey.
The new electric motors to be used on the line are currently being used on some coal freight trains running to the Port Kembla coal loader. The SRA claims the new electric-powered motors will be an improvement on the existing diesel locomotives.
In the long term, there will be an 80% reduction from diesel traction to electric traction, which must prove as a burn to the residents that live adjacent to the railway line between here and Sydney and here, especially near the gradient areas where the diesel locomotive makes an exhaust sound in ascending the grade. And a lot of that will be eliminated.
As part of Expo 86, the Canadian monorail suffers constant breakdowns and has even injured people when parts have fallen off.
While it's been Expo's biggest drawcard, the monorail is also proving to be the least reliable.
We apologise for any inconvenience.
Since opening for business in May, scarcely a day has passed when the monorail either hasn't been shut down for repairs or slowed to walking pace. The problem usually lies in the conductor shoes which connect the train to the power supply. On this occasion, a loose shoe connected with a woman's head after falling from the elevated track.
The new government under Mr Unsworth has a responsibility now to have a public inquiry into it.
But according to the builders of the Sydney monorail, none of the problems in Vancouver will happen here. The Expo system was designed for a lifespan of 6 months, while the more robust suspension and brush system will help Sydney's last 50 years.
To show you the thing most resembling the Sydney system, we have to go to the Vancouver system.
TNT says the improvements explain the comparative costs of the two systems. $40 million for the one we're getting, as opposed to $15 million paid by the City of Vancouver. As one spokesman said, in Vancouver it was Mark 1. In Sydney it'll be Monorail Mark 2. As for calls for a public inquiry, TNT has no plans to delay its construction schedule. The concrete foundations are due to be laid in the next few weeks, the first of the steel columns in November. Brad Schmidt.
The SRA is prepared not to agree to feather bedding by the provision of an extra guard, but in terms of seeking to resolve the dispute, they would, and have said so, that they would put on a traffic inspector who would travel for a week and monitor the matter.
The talks lasted most of the day, with the SRA arguing there's no extra burden on guards because there are still the same number of doors. But the union dug in its heels, making fresh demands. It wanted guards to be paid for the time they were on strike, and it wanted a delay in the introduction of the new services. No deal, said the SRA, so the union called a 24-hour stoppage from midnight tonight, affecting all metropolitan and interurban services. No deal, said the SRA, so the union called a 24-hour stoppage, affecting all metropolitan and some interurban services, with more talks planned for tomorrow afternoon over the future of the strike. John Mangos, National 9 News.
Just ladies, and she was a queen, but her reign was short, and after being pensioned off in 1974, very quickly became a shadow of her former self. She was left to see out her days as a museum piece. She was the steam train 3801. But that's not the end of her story. After an inactive 12 years, she's back, and with a full head of steam. The 3801 has been resurrected thanks to a small band of enthusiasts, and headed by Professor John Glastonbury, they formed a company, and $250,000 later, not to mention the thousands of man-hours, the Queen of Steam, the 3801, was back on the rails. Emily Booker reports.
Like a living, moving, like almost human. And they can practically talk to you. They can talk loud when you belt them along, or else they can just go nice and quiet. And, you know, you go back to the old school days when the teacher told you about the train going along. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. When they get up to the top of the hill, I thought I could, I thought I could, I thought I could.
was in pieces, the 3801 was finally breathing again. Water was whistling through its pipes, coal was glowing in its furnace, and the engineers were checking every little detail. It had come a long way from the days when it sat lifeless in the Thirlmill Rail Museum.
I thought it was mission impossible. I thought we'd bitten off far too much, and I thought, frankly, it was madness. And that's what makes it even more exciting that we did manage to finish it.
More than 300 apprentices worked on the loco. Because of the crisis in the Newcastle manufacturing industry, many of these apprentices would otherwise have been out of work. Tony, can you see a few of the bits that you've worked on here?
Yeah, there's this panel here, that section just there, and the side panels up behind here, and same panel on the other side over there.
How does it feel seeing bits of your handiwork in this steam engine?
Well, to look at now, you can see where they went, but before they were just a piece that had to be made. Terrific to see where they actually went.
To see it born in 1943 when steam was at its prime, and then to come back and to see it born again, to go out and be one of the greatest tourist attractions in the world, that's what it'll be.
1,500 people turned up for the recommissioning ceremony in Newcastle on Saturday.
Geez, George, you're doing it like a 20-year-old.
98-year-old former driver George Webber was there to open the regulator. How did you feel getting back up on the old steam engine?
Oh, it don't take long. You only got to feel him and away you go. It's in you.
Does it look as good as it did before to you?
Oh, I've never cleaned up like that before. No, never. Never had time to clean it. We're always on the track.
David Hill shovelled the first official load of coal, with a few tips from driver Clem Poetska.
It's now round the corner. The trouble with you folks are always telling me I'm doing it wrong. Well, you won't go far down. How many years you done? 43? What are you going to do when you retire?
Have to go to Fiji.
Do it? Oh, that'll be good.
While the modern diesel engines might be cleaner and quieter than the steam engines, there are some things you just can't do on an XPT.
In the good old days, you'd sit in the siding and you'd be on a freight train. And you'd be there for the mails and the passengers to go past you, so you'd have a feed. This was very good on a cold winter's morning. Hey, another one. Empty shell into firebox, and there you are. Now, how do you like your eggs? Sunny side up or not?
While the breakfasts were good, the steam engines also had their drawbacks.
In the summertime, they were pretty hot, so you'd get up to it, you know, hot day. Well, you can imagine a hot day outside, what it'd be like inside. And after you did a double to Sydney, and you'd shovel about 2 tonne of coal to start off with, another 4 tonne going down, another 4.5 tonne coming home, so you'd be up to shoveling 11 and 12 tonne a shift. And they used to call these 38 class the wife starvers, because when you got home, all you wanted to do was go to bed by yourself.
But no one was complaining about the shining green engine on Saturday as they celebrated its return to the tracks.
This is the first of the giant 38 class loco that were introduced in the Second World War. These were the big troop carriers on the east coast of Australia. It's the only locomotive that has been all around Australia and will do so again, and it can do 100 miles an hour, the old fellas say.
Faster than the XPT.
Well, all of the old fellas here today are boasting that this thing can beat the XPT. I don't believe them, and now we'll put it to the test.
Monorail. The latest problem is one of the stations. The government wants it built inside a city centre building despite the objections of the council.
Public Works Minister Laurie Brereton was on site today as the last mast of the Darling Harbour Exhibition Centre was erected. It was there he announced his latest monorail edict, saying the government would override the Sydney City Council on the location of the monorail station at the corner of Pitt and Market Streets. Developers of the site wanted the station inside the building, but the council refused and threatened to take action in the Supreme Court.
The City Council have acted with utter irresponsibility in trying to block these stations. Even the fiercest critics of the monorail agree that it's far preferable to have them in buildings off the street.
Mr Brereton also put the council on notice that if they try to frustrate the siting of other monorail stations, then the government will step in again. The government is obviously determined nothing will stop the Darling Harbour project being ready on time, and legislation to take control of the monorail station sites will be rushed through Parliament next week. The opposition this afternoon said the move signalled the end of the Sydney City Council's planning authority and accused Mr Brereton of having an indecent obsession with the monorail. Cheryl Taylor, National 9.
Doing more these days than shuffling off to Buffalo. Since the fall, they've been winding through the streets of Portland, Oregon. San Diego likes its trolleys so much, it's getting ready for more of them. In 19 cities around the country, climb aboard and grab a seat. Streetcars are coming back.
It's great. I've been driving downtown for about 5 years, and this is the best thing that ever happened to me.
In the Roaring 20s, streetcars ruled the road in many American cities until they fell victim in the 40s to a scheme by General Motors to buy them up and replace them with gas-guzzling buses. Fell victim, too, to America's love affair with the automobile. But in this day and age, trolleys make sense. They are cheaper to build than a subway system or highway, and they can carry more people more quickly and for more years than a bus. And streetcars these days have even been known to help spruce up sagging neighborhoods by spurring new business along the way.
I've discovered a whole new world. I mean, restaurants, theater.
When we first started the trolley, nobody thought it was a good idea. Now, you check every political poll in town, everybody wants it in their neighborhood yesterday.
Trolleys aren't perfect. They still need subsidies. A lot of people in Buffalo grumble that their system costs too much and breaks down too often. Testing a trolley before the system opens in Sacramento came as a rude shock to one motorist. But don't tell riders about costs or kinks. They'll tell you that very soon, this will even be the way to San Jose. From coast to coast, it's streetcars they desire.
On the Today Show tomorrow morning, live coverage
side of Circular Quay, through the centre of the rocks and along the Walsh Bay piers.
It would involve the provision of a tramway to carry up to 1.5 million people per year through the rocks and through Walsh Bay. It would be a major tourist attraction, and it will now be the subject of a detailed investigation.
But it's almost certain to get the go-ahead because it's been included as part of the tender for the development of Walsh Bay as a tourist centre with hotels and restaurants. The Minister was quick to reject suggestions that with monorails and trams joining buses and trains, Sydney will have a piecemeal transport system.
I think what we're working towards is an integrated development to provide the best public transport and the best tourist transport to meet the different needs of Sydney.
A final decision will be made at the end of the year.
It's a new fan following a weekend inspection by local government Minister Janice Crozier. The museum has been operating solely on the generosity of its members and is desperately in need of government funding.
To publicise its plight, the SRA's Museum Committee chose the 120th anniversary of the opening of the Highlands Rail Line to invite a number of ministers to enjoy a journey on a steam train. The Minister for Local Government was the only dignitary who availed herself of the opportunity and confessed both her father and brother once worked for the SRA, which made the trip especially nostalgic. However, after visiting the museum's substantial displays, Mrs. Crozier was amazed that the museum operated without government funding and was actually rejected in a bid for bicentennial funding.
Absolutely fascinated. I realise the body, and I might add a very dedicated body, we're doing a lot of work, but to actually see what they were physically doing and to see the size of the museum, to see the stock that they've got here, areas that they're already restoring, engines that they're about to restore, I'm absolutely amazed. All of it has because of their own initiative, and I think what we've got to do as a government, and certainly the people at large, is to acknowledge The steam train era is past, but we want to preserve what it was all about for future generations.
Apparently, the Australian Bicentennial Authority refused to fund the museum on the grounds that it is tied to the SRA, which is a government body. However, Mrs. Crozier says there is a strong need for the government to subsidise the museum's activities.
As far as looking at a funding situation, you'd have a section of the Premier's Department, you'd have certainly with the Minister for Tourism, and I think this is what we've got to start promoting around our state. We're talking about bringing...
On a siding and off the end of the track, 90 passengers were on the train at the time, and one woman was taken to Wollongong Hospital complaining of neck and back pains, but was later allowed to leave. The State Rail Authority issued a statement today saying preliminary investigations show the derailment was caused by human error. Suggestions that objects on the track caused the accident have been ruled out. SRA District Superintendent Len Oliver said today that it will be several days before an official report into the accident is completed.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, mate.
What are you looking like a dying duck for?
It's me shoes.
Well, I'll buy you a new pair tomorrow, Mama. Then your feet won't ever hurt again.
Blue Mountains west of Sydney has left 2 people dead and 2 seriously injured. The accident happened when a passenger train travelling west hit a mobile crane working on the track near Springwood. The 2 dead and 1 of the injured were underneath the crane. The other person injured was aboard the train. As Chris Allen Duckett reports, a similar rail fatality occurred in the Blue Mountains 3 months ago.
The accident happened about 500 metres from the Springwood station at 1 p.m. The train with 20 passengers turned a blind corner and collided with a stationary mobile crane. The crane had apparently broken down and 3 railway workmen were underneath. The force of the impact crushed the mobile crane, killing 1 workman and seriously injuring the other 2. 1 man suffering massive internal injuries was taken by helicopter to Sydney's Westmead Hospital. He later died. The other workman was taken by ambulance to Nepean Hospital with multiple fractures. On the train, seats were dislodged and windows shattered. A passenger who sustained facial injuries was also taken to Nepean Hospital. Police investigating the crash can't understand why normal safety procedures didn't work.
It appears that the driver of the passenger train did get the green light while he was stationary at Valley Heights. And that's the aspect that we're investigating now as to why he was given the green light when the crew was still working on the tracks.
A similar train crash in the Blue Mountains 3 months ago claimed the life of another railway workman. A Sydney-bound freight train rounded a blind corner near Lithgow and collided with an excavator, instantly killing the driver. The State Rail Authority announced an immediate inquiry. And today, Railway Department investigators launched a second inquiry, hoping to find out who or what...
Southbound lines.
Although the peak hour rush had finished, the train was packed with a school holiday crowd on their way to Sydney. At 9:30, the back wheels on the second carriage jumped off the rails just before an overpass bridge. Luckily, all the carriages remained upright and nobody was injured in the accident. The wheels dragged for more than a kilometre before the train came to a stop. The only real damage, railway workers said, was done to the railway sleepers the train ran over. Passengers on the train had to wait almost 2 hours before they were moved from the area. Another train was brought in behind the express to ferry them to waiting buses at Helensburgh station. While SRA inspectors from Sydney looked at the damage, they said it was still too early to tell exactly how the carriage jumped the tracks. But if another train had been travelling in the opposite direction under the bridge, the accident could have been much worse. Andrew Sams, Win News.
Near Springwood, crashing across a road and into the front yard of a house. Authorities believe that rocks placed on the track may have been the cause.
Leaving Springwood Station just after 2 o'clock, the train had travelled less than a kilometre when the driver applied the emergency brake. He saw what's believed to have been rocks on the track. As the train went over them, it bounced off the line, the first carriage ploughing across Macquarie Road and into a front yard.
I think it was just rattling and all this smoke and all that come through the carriage and dust, and he just got off.
Passengers on board managed to scramble to safety. Only 2 in the front carriage were slightly injured. The driver was unharmed. So too the owner of the house, who thought the derailment was a clap of thunder until he looked outside.
I just couldn't believe it. You know, it's the thing you see on the news, you see every day on the paper. I really feel lucky. I think if it was coming down a bit faster or the angle was a bit more, it could have plowed right into the house.
Normally Macquarie Road is a well-used access for locals, but luckily at 7 minutes past 2 this afternoon, no one was driving along it. Police believe the rocks were deliberately planted on the line, possibly by children.
We have witnesses to the incident, and we have also witnesses that have been spoken to who saw youths on the line.
The main line at Springwood is expected to be closed for 8 hours, disrupting services in the Blue Mountains. However, buses have been provided for passengers travelling during this evening's peak. 4 hours earlier, another derailment, this time at Helensburgh near Wollongong. One set of wheels on a passenger train came off the track, blocking the South Coast line for several hours. No one was hurt. State Rail is investigating. Robin Wade, National 9 News.
Train derailment, in which 3 people were slightly injured in the Blue Mountains, was deliberately caused. The front carriage of the 4-car train shot off the rails at Springwood and speared across Macquarie Road, through a fence and into the garden of a house. A woman motorist narrowly missed colliding with the unscheduled train across the road. Police say the train driver told them he thought he saw what he thought were rocks on the track.
And apparently the driver saw something on the rails, attempted to stop, but the train, the first carriage of the train struck the object and speared into the air, down an embankment and through the front wall of a house.
The driver, suffering from shock, and 2 passengers with minor injuries were taken to Nepean Hospital. The accident occurred just a kilometre from where one man died when a train hit a mobile crane 6 weeks ago. While State Rail Authority workmen toiled to repair the line and clear the wreckage, other train passengers were ferried around the scene by buses. The SRA hopes the line will be operable in time for tomorrow morning's commuter traffic.
Families were waiting when one of the engines pulled into Gordon Station this morning, halfway down its Hornsby to Chatswood run. Both engines used today date back to the turn of the century and worked these tracks until electrification in 1927. But it wasn't possible to turn the clock back that far without a hitch, and a lack of water put the engines half an hour behind schedule.
Those days, trains were right on time, spot on time all the time.
But to first-time passengers, the steam engine's potential to run late is one of its best features.
Oh, I wouldn't mind. Why not? Miss school. Especially first periods.
The engines will travel the other suburban lines over the next few months.
And we've rolled out Greg Mars again, and here he is with today's sport.